enforcement checks. We spoke in one of our use cases that I illustrated, particularly pointing to Molina Health and Signet Jewelers and Citibank in 1999. An email was dispatched with the order status. The order status was supported by a route called as order status in the web application. This order details or confirmation details or transaction details was displayed to the consumer without authentication, which led for that consumer to become adversarial, cross over his boundaries into other customer tenants and ask for their order details. So here's a quick example of enforcement checks, where if you have different web routes supporting REST APIs or your web APIs, the question that you'd like to ask is whether, if any of these web routes are triggered, are they being redirected to a login page? Or perhaps looking for an access token so that you validate that particular request is initiated by that specific user who wants to look up his data or her data. So here's a quick example of a very simple web route, which is get order status. Note that the highlighted portions indicate that there is a redirect to login, and once the role is identified, then the next step is to look up the customer's details by effectively referencing the database. Again, this is a very, very simple use case. So I'm going to switch again to the console to illustrate how we can navigate and identify for that use case. So Ocular understands information flow. So from an information flow standpoint, as we looked at this highlighted portion in our slide deck, I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. One is you have input injected, which we typically treated as untrusted input from an external entity. Now, there is a redirect happening to a resource, and then a conditional check there after the redirect to validate that condition, leading to the next step, which is looking up the database or looking up any other resource. So I'm going to conduct this simple inquiry using Ocular to identify, first of all, if we are receiving requests from external HTTP sources, and thereafter touching any database to conduct inquiries. And in this case, we have codified various types of database drivers under this global SQL injection 6. The next step I'm asking for is this condition. This is an important point that I want to pause and reflect on, because your conditions could be specific to your business domain. There is no pattern or signature that is common across all business domains. You might validate against an LDAP server, or perhaps look up a basic RBAC system, or conduct Auth0 based validation to check to see if the user is valid. So this is where you bring your specific business domain expertise into Ocular and codify them into the script so that validation is conducted in adherence to what is specific to your business domain. Now, as we define the source, the sink, and the condition, the next question that I'm going to ask is, give me all flows that are happening from source, adhering to that condition, and thereafter touching the sink. So upon executing that command, which is source is reachable, sink reachable by source, give me the flows, but branch point, meaning only if the condition is met. What I get is an entire flow pattern. Now, this is a pretty printed representation of that flow pattern. Note that these results can be delivered in a JSON format as well, and you can apply necessary conditional checks upon that flow so that you eventually take those conditional checks and then influence your build, meaning you say that here is one of the requests among the 20 or 30 that is not doing authentication, which means some consumer can touch this and conduct some degree of an attack on it. So this is one way of effectively checking for a series of symptoms chained together in its existence that would lead for a certain type of business logic flaw to manifest. Note that all results in Ocular is often delivered in the format of an information flow. And there is great amount of detail in association with that information flow format. It carries the parameter that is influencing the information flow, like you see cataloged as tracked, and line numbers associated with that is also cataloged as well. And the associated method and the file is also tracked as well. Now, this is just the basic information, but there is more detail to it. Meaning, we also track the scheme, meaning is it a get or post request, etc., etc. And all that can be extracted, if you wish to, as this great detail is available in the JSON DAO.